Everybody listen to We're Not Wizards. Because we are the best. And we're not wizards. No matter what anybody says. Goodbye.
The crowd are baying for blood. They want a show, and if you want to fight in front of Emperor Caesar in Rome, you better give them one and be the best gladiator standing in the arena. Sweat runs into your eyes. Your swords feel heavy in your hands, and the taste of blood is in your mouth. Lucius Felix is advancing towards you, sword and shield in hand. This isn't a dramatic reading. This is it's from our blog, because it is from a preview piece that was written about Gladiatores. Now, Gladiatores, or the full title, Gladiatores Blood for Roses, recently featured on our blog. It was written by writer for the blog, Steve. And the reason that I'm reading it out is because from Bad Cat Games, I've got Justin, who is back, Mr. Justin Morgan-Davies. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, Richard. Fine. How you doing?
I'm okay. You seem a bit. I was expecting a little bit more energy.
A bit more energy?
But
what, from you or from me?
You can't have from you.
From me?
I guess you can't have. I was expecting a little bit more energy from somebody who is, like the Emperor. You're in your fully funded and armed kind of battle station at the moment, because Gladiatores is it's there. It's going to be a thing. It's kind of fully funded and kind of then some. So
yes,
first
absolutely.
of all, congratulations on that.
Oh, thanks very much. Yes, and I guess that's probably why I'm knackered now. In fact,
how's mood in camp at the moment?
It's good. Yeah, no, it's very exciting. So we've got the sort of adrenaline rush of stuff going. We're knocking down stretch goals by the day. So that's super exciting. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, having just come back from the Games Expo, of course, for 4 days plus 6 and a bit hours drive each way, we're absolutely knackered as well. So perhaps that's why I'm not as super excited right now.
I'm feeling the energy in the room. I'm feeling the tiredness in the room. We should have maybe you should have maybe just curled the duvet around you and said, can we not do this another time?
No.
Throw my towel into the ring, and it's all good. But it is good because I know that last year when Gladiatores first came to Kickstarter, you ended up kind of cancelling the campaign because of, I think it was a couple of factors. There was a lot of competition.
Yeah,
I think about at that time as well.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on. That was beginning of October. A lot of stuff going on in Kickstarter as well. A lot of really great projects that were out and sort of already running before we got there. And you can never tell whether backers who are looking on the latest sort of discovery list, whether they're going to be interested in going for something like Gladiatores, which is something completely different, for example, from some fantasy miniatures game, perhaps, just picking that one out from a hat. But everybody's got a limited amount of funds and money and enthusiasm to support things on Kickstarter. So there will always be that kind of thing, and it will never get easier because, of course, there's more projects coming out every year on Kickstarter. So yeah, it was perhaps bad timing, but that's really hard because you have to launch at some point. You have to make your game plan and set up your sort of calendar for how it's going to work, and then you just run with it and hope that things work out, really. But the other main reason was actually because speaking to, it's one of these odd things about Kickstarter is as soon as you launch, you start getting all these emails firing in from different organizations, companies, and various people that want to help out.
Yeah.
But we actually got a load of requests from manufacturers saying, we'd love to quote you for the project. And, that this happens all the time. But some of them I had actually heard of but not approached. And so I thought, well, there's nothing to lose. It's always good to widen the list of different suppliers that you can use, and started talking to some of those.
Yeah.
And what they were basically saying, because some of them are more sort of focused on the printing side, so paper printing, cardboard boxes, punch boards, that sort of stuff. The quotes that were coming in were very reasonable. And then we were looking at ourselves thinking, well, we're asking for 13,000 here for the first Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And we actually don't need that much anymore, to actually fund and to actually produce the thing. We don't need that much. So that mixed that in together with the sort of multiple different reasons, and not a very strong launch as well. It wasn't really picked up that much on Facebook to start with as well, which was a shame. So, it just made more sense to pull the plug on that one and then sort of reassess and then launch again. And here we are.
What do you think the reasons were behind it? Because I don't think I've heard of anybody who kind of hasn't, once they've got the game and sat down and played the game, who hasn't got it and hasn't thought, well, actually this kind of works, pretty well for what it kind of was. Do you think there was maybe a difficulty in kind of getting the message across on the game? I mean, did you go out to the kind of the backers and non-backers and even the guys that dropped pledges to find out what the reasons were for them not kind of continuing? Or
no, we didn't really chase. No, we didn't have many dropouts or anything from backers. We just didn't have that many backers really in the first sort of 48 hours, 72 hours really that sort of jumped on it. And that very often is to do with just what other shiny visual projects are being presented on that front of Kickstarter page. So, if you don't have something nice and shiny that catches their attention sort of above and beyond those ones that are already there within the first 48 hours, really, then you really do struggle to get that initial hump. And I think just that's the way of things nowadays. Kickstarter is going to get tougher and tougher for that. And, unless you're a company that have a really strong following beforehand, we have a following on newsletter, but I wouldn't say it's really strong. We have a good following on the various Facebook groups that we run as well, Facebook pages that we run. But again, I wouldn't say it's like immensely strong. And so you just never know with that crowd whether they're actually listening and watching out for the new posts coming out and the sort of, the imminent we're going to launch messages and that kind of stuff. You just don't know, because you're not going to spam message everybody and say, are you watching? Are you paying attention? You there, wake up. And it's you just never know until you hit that button how many of those people are ready with their finger on the button to come in and support. So, and I think that's just going to carry on being harder.
I remember at the time as well, there was also another Gladiator type game that was more kind of cartoony, lots of blood and kind of guts kind of everywhere.
Yeah,
and
that was Glorious Maximus.
I wondered if that maybe cannibalized a bit of the kind of the potential market, because Gladiatores is very much a more kind of realistic looking game, and staring at it, compared to kind of Glorious Maximus, which seemed to be kind of very almost kind of like quite kind of cartoony in terms of its kind of its in terms of
there was definitely
kind of its style.
Yeah, stylistically it was very different. And Glorious Maximus was essentially a trick-taking game with the Gladiators theme on it, and it worked really well like that. And we were much more sort of, we're a card, Gladiatores is a card combat game, so instantly, it has a very different feel to it and how the two games play. and yeah, very different, more sort of realistic view of the style, the sort of stylistic art that we use. So, but Gorus Maximus was, I can't remember how many months it came out before, but it must have been 5, 6, possibly 7 months before. But, if they're both card games, one's been successful, the other one comes out, maybe there is a crowd of people, especially on Facebook, that go, oh, well, it's another Gladiator card game, and don't look any further than that. I think it's very hard actually to put out a product now that actually stands on its own merits, and people actually sort of give it a second glance nowadays, because there's just so many coming out.
Yeah, well, I remember there was the same thing with Dinosaur Island and Dinogenics. And I remember people kind of ragging on Dinogenics in terms, in some ways they were quite cruel about, the way that they were speaking about kind of like Dinogenic, because they were, there wasn't a case of, oh, you're just riffing on somebody else's game. And it's like, well, that's physically impossible, because even if two people release two games of exactly the same theme at exactly the same time, one of them could have been in development for 2 years, one of them could have been in development for 18 months. It's just it's just when they decide to kind of press the button and kind of launch it. And if people are conscious about it, especially I think it would have been maybe different if Gladiatores had been, the lone gladiator kind of dealing with the myths and legends of the Roman Empire. It's a kind of case where you've got 15 million other kind of fantasy games. I reckon that when it's kind of like a unique theme, which is your have, then if people go back and go, they forget there's been another 1,500 fantasy games kind of out there that year.
Yeah.
And they look back to but there's been one this year, which means we, which is kind of, people kind of focus on that thing. Do you think that going to the expo this weekend, do you think it kind of boosted the numbers? And was there part of you at all that has kind of looked back and went, maybe we should have done kind of more face-to-face kind of stuff, or maybe we should try and, hit the expo, last year?
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think, well, definitely a con is an extremely good way to obviously generate more sort of interest, especially on social media as well. And it just so happened that it wasn't the right time for us to launch then. Otherwise, we would have done. I think, Games Expo in the UK, is easily big enough that you get an excellent footfall. I mean, we were busy pretty much all weekend, all 3 days, busy running demos on 2 tables back to back. I'm actually getting loads of messages coming in just today of people, including Steve, saying that they sort of stopped by multiple times just to sort of say hi and how was it going. And they saw that we were so busy that I didn't even notice they were there sort of hanging around. So, it was full on. So I think an expo is always a good time, but it's interesting. We have discussed it with some of the other indie publishers as well, whether it's better to launch just before an expo, or a con rather, or launch just after. You sort of get the initial buzz at the show, or maybe launch during it, of course, but then that's an absolute nightmare in terms of logistics. And as it was, we were heading back north, just trying to hold on to a signal long enough on phones that we could actually respond to backers' comments and stuff, let alone updating stretch goals and the like. So I've actually been working on all of the graphics for the stretch goals just today to catch up with where we were over the weekend, because they're being knocked down like crazy. So, we just triggered another one this evening. So I literally sent out updated the Kickstarter page, beginning of the afternoon, and already late afternoon, early evening, I had to go and do it again because we'd gone through another stretch goal. So in answer to your question, I definitely think having a Kickstarter running, especially in the early days of a Kickstarter, having it running at a major con is a really good thing, because it was just fantastic to have loads of people come up and you sort of, smiley face, and you say, hi, hey, how's it going? Do you know anything about the game? Would you like to give it a try? And say, I'm backer 22. And you go, fantastic. It's lovely to meet you, and, they're pleased to see a face behind the game. And we're, equally pleased to see a face behind the money, in effect, behind the backer, that's there and keen and supportive, and they all sat down and wanted to play and had a great time as well. So that's just fantastic. And it's kind of, so when you're running a Kickstarter but you don't have that sort of face-to-face interaction, it's kind of odd. You miss out on that. That direct connection with the backers. It's not just sort of names on a list that just keeps pinging away. They are real people, and they are enthusiastic. That's why they're there. So to get the chance to actually speak to them and offer them promos and stuff, and talk about the game and what they wanted to know about and what they hoped would happen in the future with stretch goals. And do you have plans to include animals in the game, like in the Gladiator film? If you remember, they had, I think it was a tiger and a lion, and they were on chains and that kind of stuff.
That really angry penguin as well.
Yeah, well, that's crazy. I don't remember that. That's just in your head, Richard.
Okay.
But they did, in digging around, because that's what we wanted to make Gladiators different from other Gladiator games that are out there, is actually look into the history of Gladiators. And there's so little that actually came through. And yet these people, the ones that we have in the game at least, are media superstars. They were the equivalent of pop stars, and people would travel for weeks to go and see these presentations, these shows, these kind of choreographed exhibitions of gladiatorial combat in these arenas all around Europe. But some of them, the sort of information that does get recorded is kind of, I guess, the extremes. It was the sensationalist stuff that was written in the various journals, the writers of the time, like Suetonius and what's the other guy's name? Don't know. But they would describe things like, such and Emperor Nero put on this show, and 10,000 animals were slaughtered in one afternoon, and that's quite shocking. So we certainly don't want to glorify that. But some of the stories, I can't remember which emperor it was, but he liked to show off that he was a good archer. So he imported God knows how many ostriches and let them loose in the arena, and then proceeded just to shoot them with these, I think they're called crotch head arrows, the wide-bladed arrows that sort of have a fork at the end. And he'd just shoot the heads off all afternoon. And great. Exciting for him, perhaps, but maybe not so much for the crowd. But so this kind of stuff you dig around, you find out about is quite shocking, but it's real. It really happened. So that's kind of some of the thing that we want to actually get into the game and set us apart from other Gladiator games is that sort of historical evidence, that historical twist to the story, to what you're doing.
What about one of the things you're talking about at the moment is the Amazon kind of stretch goal. So was that a real thing? Were there kind of female gladiators at the time, or?
Yeah, they were. It was one of these things that evolved. Gladiator combats, gladiatorial sort of arena shows did evolve a lot through the different centuries. And at the start, the Romans viewed the idea that women fighting in the arena was just ridiculous. They thought it was ridiculous, but it was sensationalist, so that's why they did it. And I assume the early ones would have been slaves. Or certainly not particularly well trained. They would have had to segregate the women from the female gladiators from the males anyway. So, but it did become a thing, and the Amazon is actually depicted on a bas relief from Halicarnassus that actually shows, and they're actually named underneath. So it actually shows the Amazon, or Amazon as she was known, fighting Achillea, who's one of the characters we have in the game already. Our female gladiator. Obviously, that was her stage name. She was named after the Greek Achilles, the hero, of course. And so that for me shows that female gladiators became a thing. Became a thing that people would go and see, and obviously the editors of games, those that actually organized and ran the big shows or owned the arenas, they realized eventually that actually having female gladiators in armor bashing hell out of each other was a fantastic thing, and it would draw the crowds. So in fact, in the game we have because each of the gladiators in the game actually has a sort of fan base, if you like, that follows them around. So when you hire that gladiator for your next event, they actually bring their fan base with them, which gives you a bonus towards your overall glory score, your overall victory score. And so Achillea has a higher fan base, a larger fan base than some of the other gladiators, because we felt that was something that people would definitely go and see female gladiators fighting. And if they created sort of bas reliefs, that was, the equivalent of sculptures of the time. So they had to be pretty special.
Yeah. So, I mean, were you surprised with kind of stuff that you learned as you were doing kind of like your research? I mean, obviously you've mentioned the Amazon, but was there kind of other things? I think you've mentioned before that a lot of the gladiatorial combat wasn't actually fatal. It wasn't kind of like the Russell Crowe thirst for blood.
Yeah.
There were guys that were kind of like professional gladiators that kind of were really good at hitting each other, but in a way for entertainment as opposed to actually cutting each other's arms and legs off.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's an odd thing that digging sort of through the current sort of documentation, the current sort of historical evidence for it, it really seems to me that whole sort of show events, the big arena events that would draw huge crowds, were they sort of developed in different directions. You had those that we're sort of showing up and playing in the game where they become stage shows, and you are actually the gladiators that are there. They might get wounded, but they very rarely die because they were so well trained and they were veterans. And in fact, most of them by that stage were freemen or free women, and they fought as a professional career and putting on a show. So it's like, we were laughing because it was like at the Games Expo this year, just outside, in one part of the NEC is Bear Grylls, and he's got this thing that he set up over there. So it was almost like, it's a good example. These professionals were like the sort of Bear Grylls of the gladiator world, where they would actually put on a show for the audience. And there was two gladiators, one guy called Priscus and the other one was called Verus. And they, I think, if I'm correct, from what I remember, they would almost, I guess, they would train together. They became two professionals that trained together, and they would then go around to the various editors of arenas and basically say, we can put on a show where we will choreograph and show the audience the different styles of gladiator fighting, talk about it, put on displays and that sort of stuff for the audience. So it became a total spectacle rather than just this school versus this school, they're going to bash the hell out of each other until only one's standing, sort of thing. So Priscus and
it's like wrestling.
Yeah, it's much more like
wrestling.
it's much more like sort of WWF than what we imagine gladiator sort of arena combat to be. But that was the problem, you see, because on the other side, when the emperors and the Caesars got involved and they wanted to put on these spectacles, very often it was because they were having political and social trouble at the time. And so a way to sort of rally the people back behind the emperor was to put on these massive lavish shows, which obviously I guess they offered them free to the crowds. And those just got out of control because then they just wanted bigger, better, more slaughter, and to the point where they would literally bring in Christian slaves and apparently tie them to posts and then just let wild animals loose on them. And so it really became not a sort of a spectacle of warfare, if you like. It just became a sort of almost like a sort of example of bloody retribution sort of spectacle. So they really sort of diverged in the same directions. And I guess that's where, because that's obviously sensationalist and shocking for our sort of modern sensibilities, that's why we have remembered that and look back on it. And that's why we assume nowadays that, gladiator fights, they'd go out and bash each other to bits and hack limbs off and there'd be dead bodies lying around everywhere. And that did happen. But there was this other side to it, this kind of professional show, professional exhibition side to it. And interestingly enough, I saw an old friend of mine from university days who came over to the show to see us. And he's a stage fighter, so he actually choreographs sword fights for films and TV series and the like.
Mhm.
And he was
Yeah.
because he's dug a bit into the whole gladiatorial background stuff, obviously for business purposes. But what he was saying, which surprised me actually, it's something that we never picked up on, we never found out about, that gladiators, they actually were able to find out remnants, evidence of what they were fed, and it was a very high starchy kind of porridge diet. And the reason that they did that is because it was had a very high fat content. So in fact, gladiators generally, we assume, were actually quite fat in terms of being bulky individuals. None of the sort of,
All right.
agile superhero style can leap through the air kind of gladiators kind of we associate with modern films and the like. No, these guys were actually quite chubby, shall we say, in their armor. And the reason for that is because they could take a sword slash to the arm, to the biceps, to the thigh, to the belly, whatever, and actually they would be able to carry on fighting. They would be able to absorb that damage much better than somebody who's built like a professional wrestler or a bodybuilder or something that would take one sword slice to the biceps and that was it. Their arm wouldn't work. So it's fascinating. We're still learning even now, new stuff about the gladiators, and it is a fascinating thing. So that's what we want to make sure we get across in the sort of immersion side of the Gladiatores game, is that while you're playing the game, you do actually have the opportunity to learn little snippets, little bits of information about how they really were and who they really were, and sort of maybe break up some of those myths that they lived or died by the thumb up or thumb down of whoever was presenting the show, which I think is a Hollywood thing. I don't think that there's no evidence that ever happened. It's kind of nice, but yeah,
just not true.
Yeah.
In terms of obviously taking a bit of a kicking and going on, has your kind of confidence been restored in you as a kind of a designer? Having kind of like, obviously there's always the trepidation that once you've had a campaign that maybe hasn't gone the way that you've gone, you must occasionally kind of question, going, am I actually cut out for this? Am I seeing something which other people just kind of isn't there? Is it nice for you to be in this situation where you almost feel kind of vindicated for, not only having the game there, but having it kind of funding kind of really, really well now, and kind of stretch goals kind of starting to fall? Is that kind of been I guess a kind of a nice feeling to feel that, actually, people want to play this. People want to actually, they've got faith and they want to kind of put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, definitely. It's natural to feel vindicated, and to sort of have that bolstering of your own opinions. But we always knew it was a fun game because, we just had to present it to people we'd never met before and say, play it and tell us what you think. And if they come back saying, yeah, that's really, really good fun. I mean, a lovely example was just this weekend on the Saturday, in fact, at the show. And a family came past, they're just wandering past. They paused, had a look, thought, Gladiator game, that kind of looks exciting. And the kids were all like, yeah, can we play it? And that was really nice, that it appeals to all ages as well. And so the family sat down, the kids had a go at it, they all had a blast, they played it, and then it was actually the mum that stood up and turned to me and said, oh, I didn't think that would actually interest me, but that was so immersive. I really felt like I was actually fighting there with a character, and I had to defend myself, and it was really, really exciting. And they were just absolutely thrilled to play it, and that was brilliant. So for me, as a designer, that's the sort of vindication. I think that's the sort of gold standard,
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely in terms of the actual Kickstarter, I think the sort of general rule of thumb now is that most indie Kickstarters, on a small level, will probably, unless they're really lucky, the first time around, will probably have to at least attempt a Kickstarter twice now before they actually fund.
Yeah.
Just because of, I think, the way that Kickstarter works now, everybody's keen to see, and I know I do it myself, if I'm looking through the list of current Kickstarters that are available, I do spot all of those that are funded in the first 2 days, And then that's a kind of subliminal message to you to say, sounds like this is a good project. You know, there's a lot of people that are interested in this, so maybe I should take a look. And so that initial sort of 2 or 3 days is so vital, I think, nowadays, that if you don't hit that, which is what happened to us there in October, then it is better to pull the plug. And in fact, oddly enough, we've talked about it within the team as well quite a lot recently. And we do feel, I call it the crucible of Kickstarter. And I do feel that in many ways, going through the Kickstarter once, coming out the other end, and then sitting back, reassessing, making some changes, that sort of feedback that you get from backers first time around and the sort of general result of the Kickstarter is actually really, really useful to shake down what you need to change to make a better product. And I genuinely think we've made a better product this time. I mean, you saw the original prototype. You'll remember, a year or so back when we had generic gladiators, and they were all color coded. And the idea then, you see, because they were generic gladiators, we were kind of introducing the different fighting styles. So that's why they were all different, but they were generic. They didn't have any names or anything. It was just the Retiarius, the Secutor, the Murmio. And the idea then was we were going to release these star players as stretch goals. But every single person that we spoke to after the Kickstarter said, but why didn't you just put the star players in at the start? Because that's what everybody wants to play. If you're given the chance of playing a super famous gladiator that actually existed in Roman times and was a huge superstar and earned something like 20,000 sesterci every time they walked into the arena, why would you not want to play that character? Why would you go, well, I'll play this like generic no-name? It's like a no-brainer. And we just think, well, why didn't we ever actually think of that? And that's the problem, I think. Well, no, that's a good thing, I think, as a creator, as long as you're able to roll with the blows and sort of step back for a minute and reassess what you're trying to achieve, rather than like gripping hold of it tightly and saying, no, that's it, that's my thing, I'm not going to change. If you accept change, and if you feel that change is actually is a good thing, and it comes from outside and it will help you to create a better product, then you should embrace it. And that's what we've done this time around. And whether that's the reason why we've funded so fast, I don't know. But definitely every single person that we demoed to just this weekend, they said, I just love how you've got so much choice in the different gladiators. And already after you've played 2 or 3 different ones, you can get a feel for how different they play. They have their own combat moves, their own combat skills. They've got their own deck of cards. So each one feels different and unique. And so then it's exciting, much more exciting, because you're wanting to try them all out. And we have 9 in the game already.
Let's talk about
that's
gameplay.
Basically 9 playable characters. Yeah, sure. Go on then. Do you want to start?
Cool.
You've played it quite a lot, actually.
Gameplay.
Yeah.
I have played it. I have played it quite a lot, but also at the same time, it is your night, Justin. So, but the key part to me behind Gladiatores is it is a lot of traditional kind of combat games are you add up all the stuff that you've got, including your kind of your pluses and your minuses and your extra equipment, and you basically place your almost like your bid on the table, and then it's up to the other person to place down their hands, their advantages and disadvantages down on the table, and then you total up the score, and generally whoever's got the higher score kind of wins that round. The difference with Gladiatores is it's the reactive combat side of things which makes it kind of interesting, is that there's not just a huge kind of generic kind of let's see who won the fight. Basically you play out the different steps of the fight by the types of cards that you have. So you have got kind of like attack cards, you've kind of like got defense cards, you've almost got like kind of, it's almost like a skill kind of card, but basically an attack card that could be a thrust or a stab. A defense card could be, you've got your general block. You've also got cards like your parry. And what you'll do is you'll play these cards. It's almost like not a rock, paper, scissors, but certain.
That word.
Every card is basically says, well, this is the type of the attack.
Yeah,
And it'll also say, well, this is what you can do in order to kind of counteract against that attack. And everybody plays cards kind of back and forward between the two people who are having, a shot at each other until you can't defend against an attack, and then that gladiator then gets to take their final blow and essentially kind of cause a wound, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as much as I hate calling it a rock, paper, scissors system, that's something that people understand, at a very basic level. And it is kind of that in the sense that you've got, as you say, you've got attack cards, and then they can be countered by defense cards. And then you've got effects cards. But the effects cards don't necessarily counter, sometimes they do. They can counter an attack or counter a defense as well, but they often have other special effects as well, which you can play as a follow-up. So there's nothing nicer than a strike coming your way, you successfully block it or dodge it or whatever, and then the other player doesn't actually have a follow-up that they can play, so you can slap down something like a subdue or a takedown or a disarm even, something that's really sort of gives you that extra bonus edge. It's like playing a bonus card that your opponent wasn't expecting or can't counter or deal with. But and that's really good fun. But yeah, I mean, essentially it is a sort of rock, paper, scissors system, but it's so much more, I'd use the word convoluted, but that makes it sound more complex or confusing, and it's not. The whole way, as you know, it's such a simple system. Once you've played a couple of cards, you get it, because you've got the name of the combat move at the top, and then all your opponent is looking at is what's written in the orange banners on the left and the right-hand sides of the card, down the sides of the card. And that card dictates which cards can counter or trump, if you like, can trump that card. And then it goes back to the first player, and they can then obviously trump or counter the card that's just been played by the opponent. And so it's that back and forth. So we actually we now call the system the card dueling system. Because that's what it really feels like. Although you can play 2-player and it scales exactly the same way up to 5 players or possibly even 6. Well, actually, we have played it with 6 and it does. But although you're sort of in a grand melee of different gladiators all in arena together, when it's your turn, you still only attack a single target. Obviously, you don't sort of do a roundhouse stab to everybody. You have to pick an individual target.
Yeah.
So it's actually what happens is once the players all get going into it, it's like a series of mini card duels between 2 players. And it does feel like you're slapping down cards. Your opponent slaps down a card, then it's back to you. Can you respond to that? Can you react to that? Can you get revenge if a player manages to do something to you? Can you swiftly get in with another card? And that's the sort of, for me, that's the immersive part of the game, the sort of evocative part of the game, because it really, before you know it, you're slapping down cards in reaction to what your opponent's doing, not simply a sort of set sequence of things that you always expected to do. In other games, you just sort of play down a card, hoping that your opponent can't do anything to it, and you're going to knock off some hit points. Big deal. That's it. That's it over. Whereas Gladiatores is all about, no, you're going to have to play multiple cards in response to the different multiple cards that your opponent is playing just to stay on top. And what's fascinating to watch is when you get players right into it and they get through 9 or 10 cards in one go, and they've only got a hand of 14, and they're getting through like 5 cards each in this long drawn out sequence of blow and counter blow, flurry of moves. And you can see they're smiling because it's all going on in their head. They're imagining what's actually happened to them. And I think it's very hard not to get drawn into that and not to sort of imagine yourself, okay, he struck at me, that's easy, I can parry that out of the way, but oh no, it was a feint, damn, what do I do? Quick, try and disarm him. No, he's grabbed me by the arm, right, well, I'm going to punch him in the face then, but oh no, dodged out the way, and then we're back to a feint again, and it was a sly move, and like, oh no, what do I do now? And you'd get so drawn into it that you're just unaware of the other players that are all sort of circling around watching your every move, because, as I said, the cards that you start off with, that hand of cards, that deck of cards, and you have access to all of them, of course. It's not just simply you've got a deck of cards and you draw 3 and you play with those 3. No, you have access to all of your combat skills, and that is your entire deck of cards for the entire fight. That's your measure of endurance or your energy or your ability to survive. And this again is very thematic, because when we dug around in the history, there was a lot of references of I suppose what surprised us was there were references to how fights would literally last only about 4 minutes or so, because the sort of younger gladiators would come out, or the less experienced, the least in endurance. No, how do you say that? The lesser types of gladiators that would come out, they would be there for this kind of sideshow, and they would literally go up against each other, bish, bash, bosh, and 4 minutes later, one of them's utterly exhausted, dripping with sweat, and would collapse on the ground, and that would be the end of the fight for them. Whereas, as I said earlier, you've got the veterans who can go on carefully playing counter blows, counter strikes for hours on end, because they're conserving their energy. So the game is as much to do with that hand management of how much energy you're prepared to expend to get ahead, to get on top of the other, to put down the other gladiators, than it is about literally drawing blood and taking them out of the fight. And that for me is a different game. That is the sort of game that intrigues me as a player, as a gamer, not just as a creator. Something where you've really you do have a sequence of combat skills, combat moves, but actually you don't always want to play them all. You actually want to hold them back. And the bluffing element of the game is really fun, because you can have a player that might well have a couple of blocks in their hand, but they know that they're up against the Retiarius Calendio, and his special ability is that when somebody tries to block him with a shield, he lobs his net over the top of that gladiator, and unless they can dodge out of the way by playing a dodge card, they're going to get tangled up, and they're going to lose 2 of their precious cards, 2 out of their 14 cards. So we saw that a lot actually at the con. The Calendio player was really good at that, holding out, not trying to get drawn into many combats, or if they did, just try and get out of the combat as fast as possible without losing too many cards. And they were just watching for those players that just were forced to have to play a block, and then in he'd go with the net and just take them down. And that was just fascinating to watch, because that's sort of, you were talking about vindication. That's the vindication for me, that we've created a game that actually does thematically create a rich combat experience, if you like. Do you know what I mean?
So you were in fact kind of gaining favor from the crowd as people were gaining favor from the crowd in the game.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because of course we haven't talked about that the sort of whole reason of, well, why are you fighting these combats? And again, I think, it's nice that in Gladiatores, you're playing a gladiator school, and rather than use your own generic gladiators, you're actually having to hire these famous gladiators to fight for your school, for the benefit of the fame and fortune and the victory points that you gain at the end of the complete game. But at every event that you're going to take part in, you need to hire a new gladiator. So you want to gain as much fame and glory from the crowd as possible by showing off. So, who better to show off to the crowd than these veteran gladiators that are superstars, and, people will travel for miles to go and see them. So that sort of, again, the theme just sort of fed into the mechanisms, and I suppose that's, somebody was saying to me yesterday, well, if you could describe the sort of games that you want Bad Cat Games to be well known for, what would they be? And it's a tricky one, because we don't like to be tied down to a particular style of game. We only do fantasy Euros, or we do sci-fi epics, or whatever, But I suppose the one thing is, for me, the theme and the realism wants to be as strong as possible. And that in itself drives the mechanisms that you find in the game. And then what should happen is those mechanisms then suggests ways that the theme can be reinforced. So it's like a circle. the theme drives the mechanisms fit back and drive the theme. And I think, judging by the sort of audience and how they liked it, I would say that we've done it okay with Gladiators.
Has this has it driven you on to kind of look back at the other designs you were considering then? I mean, is this, with the Kickstarter funded, going really, really well, are you now going back through kind of like the Justin playbook to see what else you can maybe bring to the table in terms of your designs?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a huge learning curve. And that's a fascinating thing as well, because looking back to some of the designs that we've been working on, or I've been working on for 8, 9, 10 years, and you sort of dig up the old sheet of paper and prototype, and you think, this is an utter mess. And there is so much that you do learn, and you do evolve as a creator. I think. I mean, for me, it's in a sense, it's early days, because there's only Gladiatores is only our second game that's come out, but I think it doesn't sort of prevent you from wanting to continue creating those games. But what it does allow you to do is look at them with fresh eyes, with more experienced eyes, and say, okay, well, that works differently. And it's, I suppose, also as well, you probably learn to read the audience as well. You learn to read the public, the gamers' perceptions of a game, and how they understand what you're trying to do. So that's, for me, where the theme is so important, because you can basically say, if I could go to them and say, right, here's a game. It's a combat card game about gladiators, and you play cards against each other, and you try to win and score victory points. And they go, okay, I understand what you're supposed to do, but that doesn't explain how they're going to play the game at all. Whereas if I say, you're playing a gladiator school, and you need to hire the most famous gladiators, which are then going to fight for you, and they have their own fans, and you have your own fans, but you want to maximize the amount of entertainment that you give to the audience that will score you the most victory points and win you the game. They kind of like, okay, right, I see. And I think, because you're relating it to something in the real world, rather than sort of explaining a set of mechanisms to them, that I think you're going to have more people that understands what you're trying to achieve with the game than you would if you just simply threw some mechanisms, said, oh, it's like this and it works like that. So
exactly.
Yeah, so that's all I think anyway. But definitely it's good, because it means that every year I'm evolving as a designer, and I'm looking at the games that we're in the process of designing. I mean, we've got 5 on the table at the moment that we're all sort of designing in parallel, really, just because it's one of these things. It's an interesting thing. A good example is Tang Garden. Do you remember Tang Garden came out last year on Kickstarter? It's not fulfilled yet, but it came out. Lovely looking game. We definitely want to give that a play. And then the recent one that Ado has brought out is 100 Tories or 100 Tory Gates or something it's called like that.
Yes, yeah.
Different looking game, but a similar theme. But and they're only a year apart from each other, but they both have a theme that people instantly connect with and pick up. A wander through a lovely Japanese garden, and you go through these Torii gates. And Tang Garden was all about, I think, developing a garden that would impress certain dignitaries. And so you've got a theme there that people connect to. You don't need to explain the mechanisms of the game so much. So that comes after. What you've got to attract them first is what the theme of the game is about. What's the game about? What are you going to do when you're playing it? And so does it right?
Yeah, it's like that Papillion, the butterfly game.
Yeah.
And instantly people are looking at that and going, it's butterflies. There's a garden, there's some 3D stuff. I'm right in, even before they kind of know the gameplay, because the theme is so kind of is very, very strong.
Yeah.
Which is kind of
really good one as well.
Which is very, very appealing.
Yeah, a really good one as well that I really like the look of. But now I'm stuck between the two, really, because friends of mine picked up photosynthesis at the con.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, they were playing it
yeah.
in the evening. I turned up too late, so I missed it. But I'd really like to give it a try. But when you look at that and you think, all right, your tree's in a forest, and you're obviously the trees are growing, and that's going to have some kind of effect. And I see the sun is circling around the board. That's pretty cool. And instantly, you kind of know what you should be doing in the game to a certain extent. And so this new one, Bosk,
Yes.
which is I think about leaves falling in a forest. And so that really intrigues me as well. But again, it's a theme you kind of pick up really fast and you go, all right, I can get that. I can grok that, as somebody said to me. I can grok that. It's like, yeah, okay, fine. But, and that intrigues. Games like that intrigue. So I think the trick, certainly nowadays when there's like, 1,000 new games coming out every year, you've got to be, as a creator, you've got to be really careful to find something that intrigues people from the absolute get-go, from the absolute moment that they see one image of the game. They go, oh, that's interesting. Like, as you said, the Butterflies game or Fog of Love or something.
Yeah.
It jumps out at you because it's unique, it's different. It's like, what's that all about? And all the mechanisms and stuff just come afterwards.
If people are intrigued, if they've been listening along, pledge levels. If you want to get involved in Gladiatores, how much is it going to cost for you to get involved in Gladiatores? Not you, because you're the designer. But if people want to back the game, how much is it going to be?
Yeah, so the basic pledge level is £35, which is about $43 or something at the moment.
Yes.
And that's the basic game with all the stretch goals and everything thrown in as well. We've already, because we unlocked within the first 4 days, we actually we funded in the first 2 days, but I wanted to always include the special sort of Kickstarter exclusive Gladiator, because I've been carting him around as the game mascot for about 4 years now. He was the first Gladiator that we got drawn by our lovely designer, lovely artist, Anya. And so really wanted to have him in the game, the unknown Gladiator. So he's been unlocked as well. So you actually get 9 Gladiators in the basic game, and all pledge levels get him. And so it's £35 for the basic level. Then there's a £50 level, which is $65, I think. And that is the sort of deluxe set that has the play mat, the neoprene mat, which everybody that sees it absolutely loves it. They just wanted to take it home when they saw it at the show. And you also get the active player miniature, which is a really lovely sort of 3D, miniature, about 70 millimeters tall. And he does actually have a purpose. He's just not bling, because the fact you've got these multiple combat duels going on, it's actually quite hard sometimes to track. Now, whose turn was it? Because you attacked me, but now I'm counterattacking. So whose turn was it originally? So having a physical model that you can actually say, right, that's my go finished. I'm passing this to you. I'm passing the active player token to you. Now it's your turn. It just really, really helps. And it looks great when it's on the table as well, all painted up. So that's the £50 pledge level. Then apart from that, we've got the big Senator pledge level, which is a kind of all-in pledge right at the top. And the good thing about that's 175. But the good thing with that is that the further we go and the more stretch goals we unlock, some of the things would be add-ons, but the Senator pledge level is basically going to get those things added in anyway for free, if you like, within the pledge level.
Is there a pledge level where they get to fight you?
To fight me? What, for real?
Yeah, and it's kind of like a gladiatorial kind of combat with like plastic swords or something.
All right, that's an interesting idea.
Are you doing that as a pledge level?
We might be able to arrange something, Richard. Yeah, I can see you're itching. But no, interesting. We did think of, could we possibly do a pledge level? This was way back. Could we possibly do a pledge level where we could actually meet somebody? It would have to, unfortunately, be somebody in Europe, but we would actually meet that backer in an arena, in an old arena somewhere in Europe, in one of the cities, and actually do something like that, having a bit
just kill
fun. Just have a bit of fun, just with plastic swords. Yeah, but we thought like, no, that's just
Not kill
that's a
them.
nightmare. Not kill them.
But
No,
not-
that wasn't on the cards. No,
Not kill them.
not a good plan.
Not at all.
But yeah,
okay.
that'd just be too crazy.
We'll make sure that we put the link to the Kickstarter in the show notes.
Yeah.
But if people want to keep an eye on where you exist on the internet web nets, where do you exist on the interweb nets?
We can be found pretty much everywhere. Bad Cat Games Co UK or EU.eu, badcatgames.eu. We're there. We are on Facebook. Just look for Bad Cat Games anywhere, basically. Twitter, Instagram. We've got lots of stuff on there. And we've got a couple of sort of giveaway prize draws running at the moment on Facebook. So if people are on Facebook and they want to check that out, then they just need to go into the Facebook gaming groups or find us on Facebook/Bad Cat Games and join in with that as well.
Awesome.
Think of anything else?
Excellent.
Unless there's new
Fantasticus Maximus.
Yes, Maximus Decimus.
Nah, I don't think there is. I think there you go. Ken, if there's that whole speech that he does, but I'm not going to do it because I can't do his voice and it sounds stupid. If you it's, you know what I mean, it's kind of like father to a murdered meeple, you know what I mean, husband to a murdered kidder kind of thing. You know,
yeah,
I shall have my vengeance.
That's the one, yeah.
I end up sounding more like Oliver Reed though. Or is that his name? Doesn't matter. And you shall die to the sound of them clapping. Anyway, if you want to keep an eye, on what we're up to, you fannies, go to the internet webs, search for Google. You find Google. Go to Google, search for We're Not Wizards, and you'll find us on Twitter. Don't laugh. I know I messed up. It doesn't matter. I think I'm getting to get away with it, and as long as I don't keep on going on about it.
That's fine.
And you can find us on Facebook, and you can find us on Instagram, and you can find us on our website, which is we'renotwizards.com, and you can find us on our blog, which is we'renotwizards.blogspot.com, where the lovely, fantastic, wonderful Mr. Stephen McGilvery has written up what he thinks about Gladiatores.
Yes.
So there you go, because I know Justin quite well, so I couldn't really write anything out about that, because otherwise that would be collusion, I think.
Yes.
Anyway, and we get stabbed. You can also, if you want to support us a little bit, there's a couple of things you can do. You know, go to your podcast catcher of choice that have either got the words pod or they've either got the words cast in it, and maybe leave us a kind of a little rating or a review. If you like us an awful lot, tell somebody else about us.
Yeah.
You scamp. Do it.
Do it now.
Even if you don't like them. Do it. Stop this recording. Turn around on the bus. Surprise somebody. And go, do you want me to be wizards? And, do that. And then make sure you were just about to get off your stop, because otherwise you'll have to sit there being the person that shouted on the bus, and you don't want to do that.
No, you've got to go all the way around the circle. The other thing you can do is
do that, the 5 circle.
Yeah.
And then you will end up in gladiatorial combat. The other thing you can do is you can go to Apple Podcasts and you can drop us a subscription, you can drop us a rating, or you can drop us a review. If you are going to be dropping us a rating or a review, then don't give us 10 stars, because that makes us big-headed. We'll think we're Caesar. But don't give us 1 star, because we'll end up like a scrub with a wooden sword, which means we might be rubbish. It means apparently we're free. But it does make us cry. Give us something in the middle, like 5 stars.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Because it's average. And we're just a little bit average. But the person who's not been average is rather wonderful, rather fantastic. If he was ahead of my guard, he'd be like a Praetorian kind of guy, big shields and stuff, like totally brilliant at combat, up to saving people's lives, but keeping the peace at the same time, but having a good heart. It's wonderful, fantastic, Mr. Justin Morgan-Davies. Thank you very much for coming on, Justin.
Yay! I love you too, Richard.
Except that doesn't happen. The other thing you can do is and I'm going to do a shameless plug. We have another podcast out there. It's called Make Something Awful. You can find it on makesomethingawful.fireside.fm. You can also find it on iTunes as well. Basically, it's off the back of that disgusting tweet. But if you're a creator, if you're somebody, whether you're involved in tabletop or not, and you fancy having a chat about being a creative type person and potentially whether or not your first thing was any good or any bad, then get in contact or have a listen. The first episode is out there for your perusal. It might be awful, it might not be. There's only 2 more things to do though. First thing is to remember we are many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Justin?
Definitely not.
Fantastic. And the second thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Justin. Say goodbye, Justin.
Bye, Justin.
Fantastic. And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe. Roll 6s. Make something awful.
Good stuff.
But
Bye,
until
folks.
the next time. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Hail Caesar. Or whatever that is. Bye.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.